So the best way to approach, tackle, and finish off your mammoth is to surprise it. Come up upon it quietly, tackle it round the knees, take your flint-tipped spear and jab it between the... Hello everybody, welcome to and welcome back to Book Time with Elvis with me, Mark. And I thought I would make a little video today about how to tackle a mammoth, because coming up next month in March is March of the Mammoths, a wonderful event, I believe started by Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse. I will leave a link, of course, down below. And one of the things I see around this time of year, or when anyone talks about a big book on BookTube, is people getting concerned, anxious, and worried over the size of these things. And, I'm by no means an expert, but I have read and I have finished off a few mammoths in my time. So I thought I would share some of my own experiences with them for you. So perhaps it might give you some encouragement to tackle them. So what is a mammoth? Well, I don't know if it's a term coined by Jason or whether it's been in existence for a while, but a mammoth is defined as a book that's over 800 pages. So it's 800 plus pages. So I think if you're approaching a mammoth, the key thing is to find one that best suits you. Find one that you'll be able to tame or conquer or force into submission. Just like your hunter-gatherer ancestors, there's no point in going after a mammoth you can't kill, right? You go for one, at least when you're starting out, that you have a good chance of finishing off. Now, as you become more experienced, of course, with mammoth hunting, you might challenge yourself and go for the bigger mammoths, because I don't know if it's necessarily the case with the books, but the rewards, of course, can be greater the bigger the mammoth you crush, right? Now, unlike the animals, I don't think if you go for a small mammoth or a baby mammoth, in real life, you're not going to have as much meat as when you kill a big mammoth, right? That's not necessarily the case regarding mammoth books, because I think, you might have one that's 1,000 pages and it's a load of waffle, whereas, something that clocks in at 850 pages might have a lot more for you to chew over. So in this respect, it doesn't necessarily mean that because the mammoth is bigger that it's going to be better, of course, when it comes to books. But the feeling you get upon completion will be greater. So I think, if you finish a book that's 800 pages, you'll feel like, yeah, I finished a book 800 pages. You finish a book that's 1,200 pages, you'll be like, yeah, look at me, I'm great, I can tell you from my own experience recently, just finishing Les Miserables, I did reflect for a moment. I sat there and basked in the glory of joining the ranks of people that had finished a well-known book. Now, there are other books I need to finish or need to read that fall into the mammoth category. But, I put them off for various reasons. Now, one book I have to say, I've never DNF'd a mammoth in adulthood. As a child, yes, but I think that's more forgivable or understandable. Now, one I do need to read, which is a popular choice for a lot of people, is War and Peace, and also Anna Karenina, both by Leo Tolstoy. Both, you'll be surprised to learn, I haven't read yet. War and Peace I did try, as I said, in my youth, before I was an adult, and I found it hard going, but I think most, what would I have been, 13, 14-year-olds probably would. And I had other things going on, of course, at school, and didn't really get into it, I suppose. However, it is something that appeals to me, and I think that is also a key point when you're embarking on tackling a mammoth, is there's no point in going for something that isn't of interest to you. If you like history, then choose your mammoth around history. I mean, it doesn't have to be a fictional mammoth. You might decide, oh yeah, you're really interested in Napoleon, so you might pick up this mammoth, and it's a good mammoth because it's 802 pages long. So there you go. You squeeze in just over the line there at 802 pages. If you happen to be a fantasy fan and you haven't read it yet, you might go for Lord of the Rings, right? Now, I haven't read this yet because it hasn't been something that's been of great interest to me. And it's a lot of time to put in for something that you think, well, I'd much rather read I'd much rather read War and Peace than Lord of the Rings, in terms of what I'm inclined towards. Now, don't get me wrong, I am going to read it at some point. I've promised I would read it, probably sometime in December. And, I liked the films. I quite enjoyed The Hobbit that I read back in December. And I feel it's one of those books you have to read. But, if I'm prioritizing which ones to go first, it's not going to be necessarily at the top of the list. I know that will upset a few people, and I'm sure I'll get a few comments about it, but I'm not disparaging it. I mean, it'd probably be a great book, and I'll really enjoy it. It's just it doesn't call to me in the same way that something else might, A couple of years ago, I read The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, also a big mammoth of a book, and again, thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, the good thing about books, some of these mammoths, is that if they're divided up into short chapters, so a lot of chapters but short chapters, I think makes that experience a bit easier. There's nothing harder than a really long book with really long chapters. Now, should you read it as a physical book or an ebook? Now, some people have said to me that an ebook is for them easier because it's less intimidating because you don't really realize how long it is. However, perhaps conversely, you cannot see and tangibly measure, I suppose, or visibly measure your progress as you go through the book. I mean, there is something very satisfying when you open that book and you're here, and then as you progress, you can see, how much of that book you've actually put away. You don't see that, of course, when you're reading on an e-reader. But that's a personal choice. So go for something that appeals to you. Go for something that calls out to you. Don't go for something because you feel you have to read, The Lord of the Rings or War and Peace because it's one of those books you have to conquer. If you love fantasy, read a mammoth that's fantasy. Get the experience of reading mammoths under your belt before you go after something more challenging to you. That's my experience. I find it's worked for me. I for example, I love James Clavell. Shogun, for example, is a mammoth, or it might not be actually. I'm not sure. If it isn't, it's just like a couple of pages off. It called to me. It appealed to me. And when you've read a couple of books like that, and if you do like fantasy, I know there are loads of fantasy books that probably qualify as mammoths. I'm not someone who reads them because, again, as I say, it's not necessarily within my purview or field of interest. So, but if it is in yours, then why not? That's the key thing. You've got to be drawn in to these type of books. Also, don't fret about the time. I mean, it's March of the Mammoths. I don't know. You don't have to look at it like you have to finish that book within the month of March. Why do you? I think the key there is probably just to start it. And if it takes you through into April, so be it. It's not a race. You shouldn't put yourself under pressure. And perhaps feeling that pressure also gives you anxiety when you think, oh, I must finish this within a month. When I read Les Mis, ideally I wanted to get it done in January, but I got it done in second week of February or something like that. I didn't lose any sleep over it, and I didn't feel any less triumphant once I'd finished it. So I think that's very important. And if you're not ready to join in this month because you want to build up your mammoth hunting ability, and you are interested in French literature or Russian literature, and you want to read War and Peace or Les Miserables, Victor Hugo, Leo Tolstoy helpfully divided their books up into 365 chapters within their whole work. So it means, of course, you can read that mammoth. It'll take you a year to do it, but you can do so by reading a chapter a day. And by the end of the year, you have conquered, two of the best-known works in, world literature from the 19th century. So I think those are important things to consider. I do, of course, invite you to add your own tips and feedback into the comments below. But what about sustaining the pace and motivation? Now, I've found since I've been on BookTube that joining in buddy reads, group reads and whatnot have served as wonderful vehicles of motivation for me. There's something really nice about, you can be in some buddy reads where there are kind of more strict guidelines that, we are reading 200 pages a week to get through it. Perhaps that can cause some people anxiety. In the buddy reads I tend to be in, we're a bit more relaxed about it. We read, no set goal, perhaps just till the end of a particular part, a particular time. Then we pause and wait for everybody to catch up. Now, perhaps that person feels a bit of pressure that they have to catch up. But, when it's a small enough group and you're reading with people who have a lot to read, it's not a big deal, I think, to wait, a week for somebody to catch you up. And at the same time, you kind of push each other on. Sometimes you do need a little kick up the backside. I loved The Count of Monte Cristo. I thought it was great. But I made the mistake of reading it, for my part, on the Kindle in a rather dodgy ebook version. And I couldn't tell at all the progress I was making. And there are, of course, like a lot of these books, there are a couple of passages or parts up to that book where it just feels like it's dragging. And as I said, not being able to see the progress I was making, I didn't really know how much of the book I had left. And it can feel like it, goes on forever. But when you've got somebody else to talk things over with, they'll point out things you haven't seen, and that can reignite your interest and, reinflate your desire to continue and carry on that book. And I would say it's absolutely worth it. It is worth, just like the rewards of our prehistoric ancestors in subduing those mammoths and, taking from them the bounty of meat and fur and all that kind of stuff. Sustaining them, I think that the act of finishing some of these mammoths will, in some respects, nourish your brain or your, what I mean. They will give nourishment to your the reading side of your soul, perhaps. Yeah, maybe I'm being a bit hyperbolic or whatever. I don't know, but that's what I think. So my key advice is really just don't be intimidated. Size isn't the thing that should intimidate you. The style of writing, the type of language used are the things that should intimidate you. Those are the things I think that are worthy of really worrying about. Just because a book happens to be big doesn't mean it's unreadable. There are plenty of unreadable small books, Yes, and I've said it in the video I made on Does Size Matter, and the video I made the other day. I said that, you see, what did I say? I said that, just because you're reading one work, I think that's it. It's a psychological thing for somebody. They think, I can't read, 800 pages, 900 pages in a month. Of course you can. You do it, probably. If you are reading 3 books in a month at 300 pages per book, you are reading 900 books. 900 books. You're reading 900 pages. It's quite early in the morning here. So you're reading 900 pages and you haven't thought twice about it. Yeah. So I don't know. I understand the concerns, and it's all something up here where you think, oh my gosh, look at the size of this thing. However, I say to you, grab it. Grab it with both hands, go after it, and master that thing. And you will feel fantastic if you've done so. As I said, I'm no expert in this. This is my own opinion about it and my own experience when it's come to reading bigger books. And I'm sure you've all got your own methods and ways of tackling these things. So as I said, please do leave your comments and things down below. And, I look forward to reading them. So everybody, do enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.